It's a lovely Thursday afternoon. It's a little bit rainy here in New York City, kind of a gray day outside. But I'm here with all of you, and we're here in Manhattan. And I am ready to have a nice afternoon chat with all of you for the remaining little bit here of this afternoon. So glad you're here. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. And the way this works here is that I give my opening remarks, and then we do our roll call, where I call you out as I see you, names and locations. And then for the rest of the program, I answer your super chat questions. So the second half of the show is all you. You send the super chats. I provide the answers. Not always the answer you necessarily want, but you will get an answer. You send me a super chat, you will get an answer. I will write it down with my pen. Not a clicking pen today, but there you go. There you go. So there you go. That's how it's going to work here. You send the super chats. I answer them in the second half of the show. Be sure to post this on Facebook. Be sure to post this on Reddit, on Twitter, on Instagram, on ProWiki, on Bunker Chan, on whatever source or social media application you want to spread the word to. Be sure to post this. Make this a bigger conversation. The more people who watch, the more fun we have. That's how things generally tend to work here. The more people watch, the more fun we have. So glad to be with you all today. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. YouTube does have this weird thing where it unsubscribes you from accounts. The algorithms do that sometimes. And on top of that, be sure to hit the notifications bell. Because look, I didn't know I was doing this stream until a half hour ago. And here I am. So if you want to get notified every time I do one of these, you got to hit that notifications bell. Good stuff happening, folks. Good stuff happening. So just a couple business announcements before we go any further. First of all, if you are a Patreon, a patron, keep in mind that Sunday night, it'll be late Sunday night, August 1st, I will be doing our patrons only stream. I will be doing a patrons only stream. So if you are part of the Patreon community, be sure to be available August 1st. That's when we'll be doing our next patrons only stream. And if you want to be on that stream, now is the time to sign up. The link is down below. You can sign up on Patreon and you can be part of our patrons only stream. So that is coming up. Very, very, very exciting. Very, very exciting. So if you want to be part of our special patrons community where I don't bring any script or anything, I just sit there and I just answer your questions on our patrons only streams. I also send the patrons free copies of every book that I put out. They just get it in the mail. So if you want to join our patrons community, you can go sign up now and be part of our patrons only stream that's happening on August 1st on Sunday. So there you go. Just wanted to let you know about that. That's really all I've got for business announcements. So like I said, I'll give my opening remarks. Then from there, we'll do our roll call, where I'll call you out as I see you, names and locations. And then after that, I'll answer your super chat questions until we're done. That's how it works. So folks, I wanted to start out by saying the Democratic Party continues to be aware of the fact that it has a very big problem. And that problem is nobody likes Kamala Harris. And let me repeat, nobody likes Kamala Harris. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. Let me repeat this. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. I have been seeing these news items for months. I've been seeing these news items. Newsweek, Bloomberg News, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. Nobody likes her. And it's a big problem because we're all supposed to like Kamala Harris. The big bankers and corporations, Silicon Valley, they met with her in Long Island. They sat down with Kamala Harris, and they decided that we were supposed to like Kamala Harris. And all of Hillary Clinton's financial backers, they said, we are going to make everybody like Kamala Harris. But nobody likes Kamala Harris. The polls just continue to show that nobody likes Kamala Harris. Nobody likes her. I mean, as much as they try so hard to make us like her. They've made memes. They've made T-shirts. They've made her the vice president. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. She's just not a very likable person. She's just not. I mean, the polls just show people do not like Kamala Harris. And this is a bit of a problem for the Democratic Party because the folks who pull the strings, the Silicon Valley elite, the oil banking monopolists, the military-industrial complex, has said Kamala is the one we're supposed to like. And nobody likes her. And this is a problem. This is a problem. It's a problem. What do you do about this? What do you do about it? Well, why does no one like Kamala Harris? Why is it that poll after 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 poll shows that the American people just don't want Kamala? Why? Why is it that the American people can't stand Kamala Harris? Why? What is it about Kamala Harris that they don't like? Well, you can start out with how on the debate stage, when confronted with her record as a vicious prosecutor by Tulsi Gabbard, she had no response, no rebuttal, nothing. Her record speaks for itself. She's got a pretty abysmal record as a prosecutor. Civilization. Writing it down. So there's that. Then there's the fact that her big epic moment on the debate stage was accusing, basically calling out Joe Biden for his record of collaborating with segregationists. That little girl was me. And then when Stephen Colbert asked her about, geez, are you now supporting somebody you think was a rotten segregationist? She just laughed and said, it was a debate. It was a debate. I don't mean anything I say. It was a debate. It was a debate. Everything about Kamala Harris reeks of a synthetic personality. She's not natural. She's not real. She's very, very artificial. And she rubs people the wrong way. She just rubs people the wrong way. People just don't like Kamala Harris. She's not a real person. She's a manufactured synthetic personality. And I wrote an entire book about who Kamala Harris really is. Right? I wrote a book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America. I've done segments about it on radio, nationally syndicated radio programs. It was reviewed in the Morning Star, the communist daily newspaper of the United Kingdom. Very positive reviews my book on Kamala Harris has gotten. I've been on top of this from day one. And the more you look into Kamala Harris, the more you look into her family background and the fact that her father from Jamaica has denounced her, and the fact that she is a vicious prosecutor despite growing up in a left-wing activist family and going to black nationalist, civil rights oriented programs as a youth. The fact that she can so wantonly destroy people's lives without the slightest amount of remorse. The fact that she tried to kill an innocent man on death row. There was a man on death row, and she tried to block DNA evidence in the hope that she could kill him. She just was so determined to fry a bastard, basically. She wanted to kill somebody. She was excited about being a prosecutor and executing somebody, that she blocked evidence. The fact that she has locked up so many people for smoking marijuana, and then laughs about the fact that she smoked it herself. Many, many, many things about Kamala Harris just rub people the wrong way. Everything about Kamala Harris just reeks of phony, fake, synthetic. There are some genuine feelings that come across. It's pretty clear Kamala Harris feels that the world has been unfair to her. It's pretty clear that Kamala Harris feels like she's been wronged and considers herself to be a victim. It's pretty clear that Kamala Harris has a deep amount of rage and a desire to wreak vengeance. It's pretty clear that the gap between Kamala Harris and her father is a very big one. But other than that, she just comes across as kind of a very dangerous, synthetic personality. Somebody who doesn't have remorse. Somebody who comes across like they are very, very, very capable of harming other people and not feeling remorse for doing so. Everything about Kamala Harris seems fake, and this is a big problem for the Democratic Party. Big problem for the Democratic Party. You can not like Joe Biden. A lot of people don't, but a lot of people do, because Joe Biden, despite the fact that he's very much a mainstream politician, he's very much somebody who's part of the political establishment, he seems like a real person. He does not seem manufactured. Kamala Harris very much comes across as a synthetic, manufactured personality. And that's why people don't like her. And that's why the Democrats are going to have a really big problem, a really, really big problem, trying to sell her as a presidential candidate, right? It's very possible that Joe Biden could step down, Joe Biden could retire, something like that, and she could become president. But the chances of her being elected, I don't think are very, very high, because people just don't like Kamala Harris. People just don't like her. Now, that said, for those of you who may not be aware, in addition to being Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, former California Attorney General, former District Attorney of the Bay Area, Kamala Harris, the distinguished Kamala Harris, is not only our Vice President, she is also our border czar. She is our border czar. She is the border czar. She's the border czar. The border czar. Kamala Harris is the border czar. She is responsible for dealing with the crisis of mass migration. And she has come out with the White House immigration plan to deal with the fact that people are piling onto the U.S. border in record numbers. Look, the situation on the U.S.-Mexico border has been a disaster for quite some time. Right? For years, they've been finding dead bodies almost every day along the U.S. borders. What were the imperialist strategies to demonize these? Imperialist against African. And dead bodies show up along the U.S. border every day. People trying to get across, the heat of the desert, lack of water, kills them. There's been the situation with families families come across. There's the situation with children that come across unaccompanied, the unaccompanied minors. It is a crisis on the U.S. border. And it's very much, first of all, let's just be real about this, it's very much a crisis created by capitalism. Right? Honduras elected a socialist, Manuel Zelaya, to be their president. And in 2009, the United States backed the Honduran military in overthrowing the elected president, Manuel Zelaya, because he wanted to take a non-binding vote, polling the population about whether or not they wanted a new constitution. Because he moved in that direction, the military overthrew Manuel Zelaya. And ever since then, Honduras has been in a state of chaos. One of the highest murder rates in the world, drug gangs, political assassinations, utter chaos and instability. And Honduras already had problems. It's not a very big country. Honduras is not a very big country. But big chunks of Honduras do not have running water, do not have electricity. Big chunks of the population of Honduras do not, Anabaptists. Big chunks of Honduras, the population does not speak Spanish. It speaks rather an indigenous language. And, for the national language of Spanish, they are illiterate. They don't have access to good schools for their children. They don't have access to hospitals to go to when they're sick. It's a disaster. Guatemala also has big chunks of the country where people don't have access to running water, where people don't have access to education, where people don't have access to electricity. Guatemala, 1950s, they elected a socialist, Jacobo Arbenz. CIA removed him. And there was a string of military dictators backed by the United States throughout the 1980s. One of them was Rios Montt, the brutal military dictator, the 1980s, backed by the United States, loved by Ronald Reagan. Rios Montt committed genocide against the indigenous people. He sent his military out to just slaughter entire villages. Ruthless murder. And backed by the United States, armed by the United States. We also know that the United States waged a war against Nicaragua, against the Sandinistas. And in order to wage that war, they armed a group of drug dealers called the Contras. The people who brought crack cocaine to the United States were being armed by the U.S. government. And they set up shop in Honduras. They used the border of Honduras to go over into Nicaragua to wage their ugly genocidal war. And the drug gangs and the flow of U.S. weapons and the overthrow of socialist leaders has made Honduras and Guatemala very unstable countries. Meanwhile, Nicaragua, the neighbor, the socialist country, is much more stable, right? The socialist government of Nicaragua, under the slogan of Christianity, socialism, and solidarity, has raised millions of people up from poverty, has built modern infrastructure and roads. I follow the social media of Nicaragua. It seems like every day they're inaugurating a new highway or a new bridge or a new road. They've wiped out illiteracy. They have a micro-entrepreneurship program. With socialism, Nicaragua is moving ahead. It's still a deeply poor country, but they are moving ahead. Meanwhile, the free market imposed on Guatemala, imposed on Honduras by U.S. coups and U.S. intervention, has created a huge amount of poverty and instability and drug gangs and criminality. And people are fleeing, and there is a crisis on the U.S. border with migrants from Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador on the U.S. border. Now, Kamala Harris has been assigned, now she is the border czar. Kamala Harris is rolling out her plan to solve the crisis. Kamala Harris is going to solve the crisis. She is going to fix it. She is going to fix it. So what's she going to do? More of the same. More of the same. There's going to be more U.S. aid given to the corrupt neoliberal regimes of Guatemala and Honduras. There's going to be, vetting of who gets into the country and who does. There's no changes. No big changes are happening. No big changes are happening. But Kamala Harris is in charge. She went down to Guatemala and said, do not come, do not come. Told people not to flee to the United States. Now she's rolling out this plan. And much like her, this plan does not impress anyone. No one's impressed by her plan, just like no one is impressed with her. It's more of the same. And of course, the right wing, Donald Trump, their plan to deal with the border crisis, their plan is build a big giant wall and terrorize immigrant communities. All right, Fred Vienna. Australian socialists. No, Russell Means. Build a big giant wall, make it much more difficult to cross the border. And on top of that, terrorize immigrant communities with, a big expansion of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE. The right wing's plan to deal with the crisis, a giant wall, and the building up of an anti-immigrant police apparatus that will terrorize immigrant communities throughout the United States. Now, the plan, I'm writing it down. The plan of the right wing, you can bemoan it as inhumane. You can talk about how horrible it will be for immigrant children to not know if their parents will be there when they come home from school. You can talk about how it won't be good for society. It'll enhance the police state, which Americans of all strata are already upset about. They feel like their rights are being stripped away. Communist Party in China. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because the plan, the Trump plan, the right-wing plan to deal with immigration, will make all of the problems worse. It'll make all the problems worse. It will make all of the problems worse. If you make it difficult for people to cross the border legally, if you make it difficult for people to walk across the border illegally, how are people going to get into the country? Well, they're going to have to utilize criminal organizations that will smuggle them in. And this is already happening, right? As the Trump started building his wall, they already found this happening. Criminal organizations will have to start smuggling people across. The more difficult you make it to cross the U.S. border, the more the criminal gangs who facilitate such difficult crossings, the more they will prosper. Furthermore, the more terrified immigrant communities are, the more afraid and in the shadows immigrant folks are, the less likely they are to call the police, the more of a free hand criminal gangs like MS-13 will have. Furthermore, right, one of the common arguments against immigration we hear, it drives the wages. It drives the wages of U.S.-born workers down, right? And there's some truth in that. It does. But the more you intensify the repression against immigrant workers, the more immigrant workers are in the shadows, the more immigrant workers are afraid of, demanding their rights on the job, the more that problem is going to increase. Because it is illegal to pay immigrant workers, any workers in the United States, less than the minimum wage. It's illegal. And whether you're documented or not, if your boss is not paying you a minimum wage, you have the right to resist. But why do immigrant workers not generally, resist when their bosses are not paying them or mistreating them? Because they're afraid of being deported. So if you make immigrant workers more afraid of being deported, if you make immigrant workers more afraid of being deported, if you make immigrant workers more terrified and more living in the shadows, the result is going to be they're going to work for even lower pay. And they're going to become, more tolerant and have to, be less willing to cooperate with law enforcement against the MS-13 criminals. And on top of that, these criminal gangs that the right wing is so afraid of are going to be strengthened as they become more and more, depended on by people who want to cross the border. All of the Trump solutions to the immigration problem are all things that have been tried and all things that have made the problem worse. So you can talk about how they may be unethical, immoral, etc. But if you just talk about them from a practical standpoint, they're not a solution. They will make it more of a situation where immigrant workers drive domestic wages down. They will make it more of a situation where the criminal gangs flourish. So the right wing has no solution. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are offering more of the same. That's all they've got, more of the same. More of the same, folks. We've seen this movie before. More of the same. So what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Folks, I want to read you 2 paragraphs. Really, I think it's 2 sentences. I want to read you 2 sentences. These are 2 sentences from the very last page of the Communist Manifesto. And they are 2 sentences that very few communists in the United States seem to have any comprehension of. And they are 2 vitally important sentences from the very last page of the Communist Manifesto. And I printed them out, got them right here on this slip of paper, because if you are a communist, this is your job. This is your job. This is your job. And when a situation like the border crisis comes along, when a situation like police brutality comes along, when a situation like, crumbling communities and the dying economy comes along, communists have to know what they're supposed to do. What are you supposed to do? If the capitalists are launching a war against a country, what are you supposed to do? If working people are angry about a rising police state or their taxes getting too high, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? If you're a communist and there's a crisis on the U.S. border, what are you supposed to do? In all kinds of situations where working people are angry with the current state of affairs and they want to do something about it, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? If there is a crisis in society, if working people are angry about it, what are you, as a communist, supposed to do? Well, there are 2 sentences here that say what you're supposed to do. Quote, "In short, the communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. In all these movements, they bring to the front as the leading question in each the property question, no matter what its degree of development at the time." Let me read it again. In short, the communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. In all these movements, they bring to the front as the leading question in each the property question, no matter what its degree of development at the time. Let's talk about these 2 sentences. They're 2 pretty big, loaded sentences. But they are rather important because very few communists in the United States at this time seem to comprehend what they say. It says the communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. Whenever working people are in revolt against the existing social and political order of things, communists support them. Now, does it say communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things that is left-wing? No. Does it say communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social order of things as long as it's progressive and leftist and being promoted on CNN? No. Does it say communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement except for the ones that we consider to be conservative, except for the ones that include, racists and reactionaries in them, except for the ones that might have people that believe in conspiracy theories? And no. It says communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing and political order of things. Whenever working people are angry at their conditions, are demanding things get better, that things improve, communists support them. Everywhere. If workers are mad that their taxes are too high, communists support them. Workers are mad about police-state repression, communists support them. Workers are mad about, lack of infrastructure, communists support them. Workers don't want there to be a new war, communists support them. Wherever working people are expressing dissatisfaction with the system, wherever there emerges some kind of a revolutionary movement, communists support them. However, the next sentence is very important. In all these movements, they bring to the front, as the leading question in each, the property question, no matter what its degree of development at the time. Often, when workers are mad about various things, they express very confused views. And communist job is to bring forth the property question, bring forth the need for socialism, no matter what degree it's developed at the time, no matter how confused the people are, no matter how wrong the people are, no matter how undeveloped they are, no matter how little they understand socialism, no matter what it is, whenever there's a mobilization of society, whenever the people are angry and rising up and demanding things change, no matter how confused and backward and right-wing and delusional and conspiratorial or religious or nuts or no matter what, whenever people are at odds with capitalism, at odds with the ruling class, at odds with society as it is, communists go to them and bring forth the property question and show them that socialism and the means of production, the changing of property relations, is the answer. In all these movements, they bring to the front as the leading question in each the property question, no matter what its degree of development at the time. If working people are angry about immigration, we support them. But we tell them the answer is socialism. No matter how backward and confused, we don't support their backward, confused racism and xenophobia. We don't support that. We tell them that the leading question is the property question. If a working person is upset about the situation on the border, we go to them and we bring forward the property question. We explain that the crisis on the border is rooted in capitalism. And then we bring forth the property question. We put forward a solution that could address the crisis, that could solve the crisis. That's what our responsibility is. When people are at odds with the system, we, the communists, put forward a solution, a program. We bring to the front the property question. We put forward a solution that challenges the economic foundations of capitalist society. And when it comes to the crisis on the border, we have class reductionism. We have a solution. And that solution is the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor. In order to end the crisis of mass migration, in order to end the situation where there are thousands of people piling up on the U.S. border, fleeing from Honduras, fleeing from Guatemala, there is a solution. And that solution is for the United States and China and Mexico and Nicaragua to team up for the economic development of these regions. Okay, we just need to educate. We need to create an economic corridor through Central America that will strategically raise that region out of poverty, out of chaos, and out of criminal and drug gangs. We need the strategic economic development of Honduras and Guatemala. Mexico, the United States, Nicaragua, and China all need to get involved. All, Lenin said, not support. All need to get involved in stabilizing that region with jobs and economic development. There needs to be infrastructure built. There need to be hospitals built. There need to be schools constructed. It is a matter of national security that region, Central America, be economically stabilized with an economic corridor. And that will end the crisis. If people in Central America have jobs, if people in Central America have education, if people in Central America have access to health care, if people in Central America aren't living in fear of drug gangs and terrorists, they won't be piling up on the U.S. border. So in order to resolve the crisis, the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor must be constructed. That is the solution. Sandino was the leader of the Nicaraguan people in their struggle against imperialism. Zapata, Emilio Zapata, was the leader of the Mexican Revolution. And so the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor, that is the solution to the crisis on the U.S.-Mexico border. It is a program of economic development. It is the mobilization of the Mexican government, the U.S. government, the Nicaraguan government, and the Chinese government to strategically stabilize that region and end the crisis of mass migration. And why is this bringing forth the property question? Because the free market isn't going to do it. If the free market was going to solve this crisis, it would have solved it a long time ago. But the free market, the natural workings of the capitalist system, preliminary transformation into capital, profits in command, will not solve this crisis. Not happening. So it is necessary for the means of production, the centers of economic power, to be forced to solve the crisis. We need a government of action. A government of action to swing into action. We need the state to swing into action to forcibly force the private sector to economically develop that region and end the crisis. A state-led economic corridor must be created as a mechanism for securing national security, for ending the mass migration crisis. Restrictions. Cuba. Embargo. That's what must be done. And if suddenly this economic corridor were to be created, you would not have a crisis of mass migration. That is the solution. And that, by bringing forward this solution, we, the communists, are doing our job. The next time one of these anti-immigrant bigots gets up there and is like, oh, the immigrants are terrorists, they're rapists, they're going to come take your jobs, oh, build a wall. You got to just simply, you don't have to call them a bigot, you don't have to do anything. You just say, oh, now are you for the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor or are you against it? And if he's against it, then all you have to do is point out that, oh, well, your big giant wall and your ICE raids are only going to make the problems worse. We have the real solution. And the next time Kamala Harris or AOC are out there and they're saying, oh, well, the immigrant communities, oh, it's awful and we feel compassion. You got to say, okay, I'm with you. I feel compassion as well. Are you for the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor or are you against it? And if they say, well, we care, we have compassion, say, okay, we have compassion too. We have compassion too, but we want to know if you are for the solution, the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor, or if you're against it. We didn't ask whether you have compassion. And this solution that brings to the front as the leading question the property question, forcing the means of production to work in the interests of society, cuts like a knife through right-wing bigotry, cuts like a knife through left-wing demagogy. It is a real solution, raising the question of property. And this is how communists approach situations like this. By bringing forth the question of property, and putting forward a socialist program. This is not the only area in which we bring forth a socialist program. This is not the only area in which we talk like this. Great example. Great example. Climate change. There's an issue. There's clearly an issue. Fossil fuel dependency, pollution, CO2 emissions. There's problems, folks. There's definitely a problem. The right wing says, oh, it's not really a big deal. Get the government off our backs. The market will solve it. Let the market take care of it. There's not really a big problem. That's one. That's the right wing. Global warming is not real. It snowed last month. It can't be real. That's the right wing. And the left wing says, oh my God, climate change is real. It's an emergency. It's a disaster. How dare you believe in economic growth? How dare you? How dare you? We need degrowth now. Drive down living standards now. Well, we can cut through the right wing and their delusions, and we can cut through the left wing degrowth delusions like a knife. Like a knife. We can cut through them with our program. Fusion City. We must get off of fossil fuels, correct? Fossil fuels are driving the climate crisis, correct? Technology and technological advancement is a good thing, correct? Then it's time to build Fusion City. An emergency program for the creation of fusion energy. A joint plan of action where the government of Russia and the government of China and the government of Iran and the government of Venezuela and the government of India and the government of South Africa and the government of Brazil, all the world's fusion scientists need to come together in one space. One international territory must be created in the heartland of America. And all of the leading fusion energy researchers need to pile into one gigantic facility. Fusion City must be constructed. Something like the Manhattan Project to create the atomic bomb must be created to save humanity from fossil fuels. Fusion City must be built. Fusion City must be built. A city in the center of America, in the heartland of the United States. A gigantic international territory for a combined global effort against climate change must be constructed. Fusion City now. We must build Fusion City. And if we build Fusion City and we concentrate the entire global effort for fusion energy in one spot, in one location, and we provide them with all of the resources they need and all of the time and money they need, and we combine all of the great scientists in one place, in one gigantic facility dedicated to one project, rescuing humanity from the nightmare of fossil fuels. If the whole human race comes together, it's not a competition. It's not Russia and China versus the United States. It's not Europe versus Britain. It's not, no. If there is one combined emergency crash program to save humanity from fossil fuels, we will have fusion energy very quickly. Look at what China's already doing with their artificial sun. It can be done. But fossil fuels is a curse hanging over the entire human race, holding back economic development and economic progress. And one human family, one global community must solve it together. Fusion City now. Fusion City must be built. So the next time you hear some right-wing guy up there, global warming ain't real, and it's just a conspiracy to make me pay bigger taxes. I don't like it. You say, are you for Fusion City or are you against it? And the next time you hear some liberal politician up there, how dare you? Economic growth is bad. We need to drive down living standards. How dare you? Climate change. And next time you hear that, you can simply say, now, are you for Fusion City, the solution to the climate crisis, or are you against it? That's the question. Bringing to the front the leading question in each, the property question. That is our responsibility. Are you for Fusion City, or are you against it? Are you for the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor, or are you against it? That's what needs to be raised. Fusion City, the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor, these are demands. These are programmatic solutions that bring to the front, as the leading question, the property question. They are solutions that involve a government of action moving swiftly to address the crisis. And they would provide a solution. Thoughts on siege socialism? They're a solution. They are a solution. So are you for it, or are you against it? Folks, we need to get beyond the notion that we are trying to make things worse. This is a very big problem in left-wing circles. If you want to be a teenage edgelord and rebel against your parents and stick it to the man and let everyone know just how angry and upset you are and how unsatisfied you are with the world, by all means do that. But if you actually want to see a socialist America, if you actually want to get beyond the horrors of American capitalism and get toward a society where the people come first and profits are no longer in command, if you actually want to see a socialist America, you need to present solutions that will solve problems, not create them. If you want to lead America to socialism, you need to make clear that your goal is to save America, not to destroy America. We need to bring forward serious policy solutions that bring to the front the question of property. That is the way we can address the crisis. The Sandino-Zapata economic corridor is a solution to the mass migration crisis. Fusion City is a solution to the climate change crisis. We have an economic program, right? We look at the country, it's falling apart. We have an economic program to rescue the country. Step one, a mass infrastructure development project. Millions of people hired to start rebuilding the country. Schools, hospitals, bridges, power plants, a mass mobilization of the population to rebuild the country. Step two, public control. Christian origins. Right? Public control of oil, natural gas, coal, and timber, the nationalization of the country's natural resources. Step number three, public control of the lending of money so that credit is assigned strategically in the interest of the country overall, not based on what the market would dictate. And step four would be the enactment of an economic bill of rights, the right to jobs, housing, education. That is our 4-point economic program. That is our 4-point economic program. China. That is our 4-point, China Taliban wrote it down. That is our 4-point economic program. And with that 4-point economic program, we could save the United States from the crisis of capitalism and decay. If you rebuilt the country, hired millions of people to go to work rebuilding the country, if you then put oil and natural gas and coal and timber and all of our natural resources into the public budget, as public property, you had the assigning of credit and the lending of money strategically operated by the state, no longer done, by whatever private bankers think can make them some money. If you did that, if you then enacted an economic bill of rights, guaranteeing the right to jobs, housing, and education, if you took those 4 steps, the United States would be an economic powerhouse. The economy would be speeding ahead. It would be growth time in America again. Right? And again, those are 4 demands that bring forth the question of property. This is what our job is. You need to get out of your mind that our job, we want the country to fall apart. We want to make things hard. Get that out of your mind. We are trying to save America from capitalism. We are trying to save America from imperialism. Imperialism hurts all working people. Capitalism hurts all working people. Racism hurts all working people. The solution is an economic program that challenges property relations. We need to bring to the front, the leading question in each, the property question, no matter what degree of development at the time. This is how communists should operate. This is how communists should operate. This is the way serious Marxists, serious revolutionaries, people who aspire to actually lead the country, this is the way they speak. And this is how I want you to start thinking. Right? Is there a housing crisis in Russia? Okay. Housing. Putin. Progressive. That's how we need to start thinking. We need to start thinking like this. We need to get out of the protest cage, out of the movement, and to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. Get out of the destructive vandal mindset. Get out of the unleashing of rage and impulses. It's time to start being city builders. City builders. We need city builders. We need a constructive socialist movement. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. That's what we need. And it's with this kind of thinking and this kind of orientation that the USA can move toward socialism. And that is my opening remarks for today. Those are my opening remarks for today. Hope you enjoyed them. Now is the time. Now is the time to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And now I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us today? Names and locations. Okay. All right. Singapore. Write it down. Singapore. Okay. All right. So we got Luca, Madison, Wisconsin. Christian on I-287, New Jersey, driving home. Steve in Southwest Michigan. Brazil. Elias from Finland. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Balthazar in Oakland. All right. Is there a story behind your badass ring? Story behind badass ring. I wrote it down. All righty. I will tell everyone about the Sandino corridor in Fusion City. Very good, Shulgi. I'm glad you're going to do that. Very, very glad to hear that. All right. Difference between embargo and sanctions. Embargo. Sanctions. All right. Tristan in Maryland. Billy Kane in Gateshead, England. Elias in Wisconsin. Alan in Chicago. Brady Green. Mohsen from Iran, Dylan in California. Who else is with us? Chicago, alrighty. Loveland, Ohio. Glendale, California. Cambridge, United Kingdom. Eddie from Central New Jersey. Happy Valley, Oregon. Ben from Edinburgh. Gasanoville, there you go. Corona, California, birthplace of Gary Webb. Terre Haute. Stephen in Seattle. Jenny Lynn, Cincinnati, good friend of the show. Todd in Seattle. Santa Barbara. Alabama, Sharon Pitts, Tacoma, Washington, Denver, California, Zephyr from Eugene, Oregon, Poland, Ohio for the last time before moving to New Orleans, Ben from Aberdeen, Scotland, Mo from Pomona, California, Chicago, there you go, California, Tucson, Arizona, Fresno, California, Space Communist, Portland, Oregon, Mo in Toronto, Vinicius from Brazil, Glasgow, Scotland, Poland, Hi from Mississippi, Communism, Peace of Mind, Kieran from San Diego, Grand Traverse, Michigan, wow, Loveland, New Zealand, Sweden, there you go, Chicago, Bermuda, Sydney, Oz, Nate in Chicago, John in Denver, Zach in Minnesota, U2 Jenny, Cambridge, UK, Eatonville, Washington, Quinn Anderson, Birmingham, England, very good, Kendall in San Diego, Andrew in Denver, good stuff, good stuff, Finland, Marshall in Finland, Anybody else? Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Naples, Florida. Harold Sullivan. Good stuff. Good stuff. All righty. All right. Now Vallejo, California. Jason Sarna. Very good. Norway. Daniel is in Norway. So there you go. All right. Now, I will start reading and answering the super chats. And if you have more super chats, keep them rolling in, because that will be the rest of the program, is me reading and answering your super chats. So keep them rolling in, and I will give answers to your super chat questions. Like I said, may not always be the answer that you want, but you will get some kind of answer. Super chat number 1. Civilization makes humans weak. I don't know what that means. I mean, what defines civilization, right? I mean, I would argue that civilization is a display of human strength, humans cooperating and doing things. I mean, look at the fact that, that we as a species, we have gone from hunter-gatherers and caves to space travel and iPhones. Ants have been building their ant farms the same way for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Beavers have been building their beaver dams the same way for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But in just 5,000, 6,000 years, human beings have accomplished amazing things. What the human species is capable of doing is amazing. I don't call that weakness, my friend. I call that strength. The strength of human beings is different than the strength of animals. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the first poem ever written down, the oldest poem that we've ever found, the Epic of Gilgamesh, tells of Gilgamesh, the mythical founder of ancient Mesopotamia, battling against a giant bull, the bull of heaven. And the bull of heaven is way bigger than Gilgamesh. It's big, stronger than Gilgamesh. But Gilgamesh possesses human intelligence. And with his human intelligence, he is able to defeat the bull of heaven. It's because of the Epic of Gilgamesh that the tradition of bullfighting still exists. Did you know that? Bullfighting, the ritual of bullfighting, was originally an ancient Mesopotamian ceremony reenacting the Epic of Gilgamesh and the fight between Gilgamesh and the bull of heaven. Folks, communist leader. Folks, why does Satan in Christian imagery have horns? Why does Satan have horns? Why is the cartoon Halloween image of the devil always have horns? Because in nature, bulls have horns, cows do not. Rams have horns, female sheep. Space, communists in space. Female sheep do not. Horns are a symbol of unrestrained testosterone. The devil has horns because the devil represents the animalistic side of men, males, taking control. Testosterone, the male hormone, imperialist retreat in Latin America. Testosterone, the male hormone, that drives us toward aggression, drives us toward sexuality. Signs of divinity. The unrestrained testosterone. When the male is incapable of restraining his sexual desires, incapable of restraining his desires for aggression and for his rage, when a man ceases to be a man and becomes a bull, or becomes a male animal, this is evil. When a man ceases to assert his humanity, but instead becomes controlled by his rage and controlled by his sexual desires, this is evil. And this is the defeat of the human and the triumph of the bull. This is the bull, the animal, triumphing over the human. That is what evil is. When civilization is defeated and the animalistic side of humans takes power, that is the definition of evil. And evil is the triumph of the horns of the bull. And that is why Satan, traditionally, in Christian imagery, has horns. Because Satan is the animalistic side of human beings, the animalistic side, the aggressive, the sexual side of human beings, losing control, or taking control. When people are governed by their destructive animalistic impulses, this is evil. But when people's reason and intelligence is in control, this is good. That when humans are acting human, this is good. When humans are acting like beasts, like depraved beasts, this is evil. And Satan has horns because Satan is basically, it really gets down to it, Satan in the Christian imagery, Satan is toxic masculinity. That's basically what Satan is. Satan is a man controlled by his testosterone. It's that simple. So when you ask, civilization makes humans weak, I don't think, people who would make that argument have the same definition of strong and weak that I do. All right. Imperialist strategies against African socialist countries. Well, during the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the primary way the United States fought against socialist countries was by waging proxy wars. You could talk about, Ethiopia. You had the rise of the Derg and Mengistu, right? They were aligned with the Soviet Union, aligned with Cuba, trying to move towards socialism. So the United States began arming the separatists of Eritrea. And waging a proxy war against the government of Ethiopia. And Angola, right? The MPLA, took office. The MPLA, and they took office. And so the United States began arming UNITA and Jonas Savimbi as terrorists to fight against the MPLA. Any variety of socialism, which socialist principles would you see as absolutely non-negotiable? Okay. Socialist principles, non-negotiable. And communists suppress religion. And it was during the 70s and 80s the main way the U.S. government fought against communists Sorry, can someone get rid of this Daniel Maxwell? I don't know what the hell he's getting at, but, you know, get rid of that. But anyway, but anyhow, thank you. In the imperialists now, it seems like they, thank you very much. It seems like now they at this point, they destabilize countries by, staging color revolutions. That was what they did in Libya. There was kind of a mobilization to destabilize the country. They've done that in Zimbabwe before against the ZANU-PF government. They mobilized U.S.-backed protest movements to destabilize the country. So it doesn't seem like the proxy war strategy is what they're using at the current time. It seems like more the strategy of color revolutions and creating and fomenting unrest and ethnic division, right? In Nigeria, they play the Muslims against the Christians. In other places they have, protest movements, etc. The situation in South Africa is very serious right now. There's big divisions among the government of South Africa. And the African National Congress government has failed in many ways, failed to address the needs of the African people. And so, we're seeing a lot of turmoil in South Africa right now. And you can be sure the imperialists are trying to manipulate that turmoil to serve their own ends. That doesn't mean, though, that many of the people protesting are not 100% right. They didn't create the crisis in South Africa, but they're going to try to manipulate it like they would with any crisis. But yes, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the main way the U.S. imperialists fought socialism in Africa was by waging proxy wars. Now, it seems like they create unrest and instability as well as sectarian religious division. Marxian variants of socialism seem to subsidize across the world, having broad influence. Why did Marxian variants of socialism seemingly subside across the world despite having broad influence? I don't even know. Marxism subside. All right, very good. All right. Okay, were the Anabaptists early communists? No, they were not. The Anabaptists, that was a religious movement that started in Germany. It was Protestants who did not believe in baptizing babies. They argued that a baby cannot accept Christ, cannot become a Christian and get baptized, or christened as the Catholics call it, because the baby is too young. And they argued that you cannot really accept Christ until you are an adolescent, was the belief of the Anabaptists. Basically, when you're 14, you're old enough to accept Christ, you're old enough to sin, you're old enough to get saved or whatever. And that's the Anabaptist movement. And a lot of evangelical forms of Christianity are breakaways from that strand of thinking. They were very radical. They were considered one of the most radical Protestant sects in Germany during the 1848 period. And before that, they were very radical. And often they were executed and killed by other Protestants even. So there you go. All righty. All right, Red Vienna, Austrian socialism. Well, there were massive uprisings in Vienna in the 1920s. I've read a lot about that, and I haven't read a lot about that, I should say, because I don't know very much about it. But just like Germany was having big turmoil during the Weimar period, in Vienna, in the aftermath of World War I, there was a lot of poverty, a lot of suffering, and there was a big communist party, and there were uprisings and protests going on. And I believe Wilhelm Reich, who became this weird psychologist, Freudian, mass psychology of fascism, he participated in some of those big uprisings in Vienna. There were some brutal massacres. I believe that at one point there were some cities that were seized by communists in Vienna, but I don't know my Austrian history well enough. So there you go. All right. Russell Means and the CIA. So in the 1980s, 1979, you had the Contras, 1979, the Sandinistas took power in Nicaragua. Christian socialist government in Nicaragua, right? Sandinistas, they're socialists, they're aligned with Cuba, they're aligned with the Soviet Union. They take power. So the USA starts arming these people called the Contras, that are terrorists and drug dealers that are trying to overthrow the government of Nicaragua. And so the CIA got Russell Means, who was the main Native American activist during the 1970s, leader of the American Indian movement. They got him to go to Nicaragua among the peoples of the Mosquito Coast and start arguing that the Sandinistas were racist and that they were white European, they were colonizers. They were bringing this white Western ideology, this European ideology called Marxism, and they were using it against the indigenous people. And Russell Means went down to Nicaragua, and he worked with the Mosquito Native Americans to fight against the Sandinistas. He made propaganda films demonizing the Sandinistas. And Ward Churchill was his speechwriter during all of this. Ward Churchill, worked with him and all of that. And it was the beginning of the strategic use of ID poll, right? Identity politics, right? If you support the Sandinistas, this revolutionary government in Nicaragua, you're a big fat racist, right? I mean, even though the majority of people in Nicaragua are indigenous, even though the U.S. government is arming, is murdering Nicaraguans to try and overthrow their socialism. Oh no, the U.S. government just cares so much about indigenous people and indigenous people's rights, and the U.S. government is just trying to protect this group. And if you oppose U.S. destabilization of Nicaragua, you're a big fat racist. This is Vosh, right? What Vosh does, and this is the hijacking of anti-racism and the hijacking of indigenous people's movements to serve imperialism. And there's a great Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz wrote a very good article, very good book about this topic and how the Native Americans were kind of manipulated, this divided indigenous activism in the United States. All right, Mexico's 1938. Right. Mexico, 1938. Nationalization. So there you go. That was what that was. And Russell Means, he was hanging out with the Moonies for a while, and the Moonies, and he was hanging out with who else was he hanging out with? The Moonies, and with he was the libertarian. He was hanging out with libertarians and stuff. Gaddafi, ambassador. 2011. All right. Wrote it down. All right. So next question. Why did they slaughter the indigenous people in Guatemala is the question. Well, during the 1980s, among the indigenous people, there was a communist insurgency. There were some indigenous folks in Guatemala who wanted to not get evicted from their land and wanted to, have land redistribution and such, who took up arms and formed a Marxist guerrilla group. And in response to that, Rios Montt, the military dictator, went and slaughtered entire villages of indigenous folks in Guatemala and committed genocide. That is a fact. There was even a trial in Guatemala a few years ago, and he was convicted in that trial, then released on a technicality. But yes, the USA backed Rios Montt, the brutal dictator of Guatemala, to commit genocide against the indigenous population. The USA armed him and gave him weapons. And Ronald Reagan, there's a picture of Ronald Reagan with a t-shirt, "Fight Communism in Latin America." It's awful. It's awful. Maoist party in China. Yes, there is a party in China called the Chinese Communist Party that has 90 million members, and its ideology is Marxism-Leninism, and it has Mao Zedong thought and Deng Xiaoping theory, Xi Jinping thought, and other ideas. Now, there are among people in China who are somewhat critical of the Chinese government and invoke Mao in order to do it. There is a big spectrum. There are some that are blatantly anti-government and almost acting as puppets of the United States. There are some that are very well embedded in the party and just want China to move in a more socialistic direction. Right? Whenever you have a party of 90 million people, there's going to be disagreements within that party. They're not all going to see eye to eye on every issue. So that's what you need to remember. And, the Chinese Communist Party is the party of Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong thought is their official ideology, is their official thought, right? Their ideology is Marxism-Leninism, but Mao Zedong thought is their thought. And there's a speech by President Xi Jinping called "Mao Zedong thought should be central in all things." So, China is a huge country, the most populous country in the world. There's going to be very, very many different views. And Mao Zedong is the founding father of China, right? So, there are many, many, many people in China who are going to have the perspective, going to see Mao as a good guy and base their critique of the government on being more in line with Mao's ideas. And there's a big spectrum of people who would fit into that category. But the ones that are picked out by the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are the ones that I am immediately suspicious of. I'll tell you that much. All right. What is class reductionism? Class reductionism is very real. It is a real phenomenon. It is an ideological deviation. There is a certain communist group that I will not name, and they chant at their rallies, I've seen it, white power and black power are the same, racism is the boss's game. Now, they chant that at their rallies, and that is class reductionism, because white power and black power are not the same. White people, being racist and wanting to push back black people, and black people fighting for their rights are not the same. White power and black power are not the same. But if you are a class reductionist, if you're saying all that matters is class, race, and the history of injustice doesn't matter, you might think that. That is class reductionism. Class reductionism is a real phenomenon. It's when people say, look, nothing matters but class. We reduce it all to class. Class is all that matters. That's class reductionism. Okay? It's a deviation. The problem is, a lot of the people on the internet who shout, class reductionist, those are people who they mean anyone who talks about economics, anyone who frames things in economic terms, anyone who still believes in Marxism, still believes in actual Marxism, and doesn't believe in this college liberal arts, oppression theory, the people who still use words like class struggle and solidarity and don't talk about intersectionality. You know what I mean? People who still believe in the ideology of Marxism, not this liberal bullshit that everyone's required to learn in college. People who still believe in that, they shout, you're a class reductionist. No, you're not, right? If you acknowledge the history of racism, you are not a class reductionist. If you are anti-imperialist, you are not a class reductionist. If you acknowledge the oppression of women and what women go through, you are not a class reductionist. If you acknowledge the oppression of LGBT people and what they've suffered, you are not a class reductionist, okay? Class reductionism is ignoring all questions but the class question. And there are some people who do that, and they're wrong. But what these people mean it as, they just mean if you're really a Marxist, you're an evil class reductionist, and they don't understand anything. All right. We just need to educate approach. Well, that's not what I said. What I said is that we need to bring forth the question of property. And we need to, whenever people are at odds with the system, we need to show support, and we sympathize with them in their struggle against the system, but we do an impression. Oh, thank you, Captain Waffles, for liking my impressions. I'm sure there'll be plenty more by the end of this thing. It's not just a matter of educating. It's not we just need to educate, like liberals would say. It's a matter of showing sympathy for people that are suffering at the hands of the system and bringing forth a solution that challenges the property question and brings forth socialism. It's not we just need to educate. You're missing the point. All righty. Lenin said not to support uprisings of reactionary classes. I don't know the context of where Lenin said that, but I'll tell you one thing. Lenin hugged the Emir of Afghanistan. Did you know that? Back in the 1920s, the Emir of Afghanistan was the most reactionary, primitive, barbaric, authoritarian leader. And Lenin embraced him, and he said, you're fighting the British Empire, you're our guy. We don't care, you might be backward. Lenin convened the Congress of the Peoples of the East. And he said to all the peoples of Asia, all the peoples in Central Asia, you're fighting the imperialists, you're fighting the British, you're fighting the Americans, you're trying to break your country free. We don't care, we are with you. We are with you. That imperialism is the main enemy. Read about the Congress of the Peoples of the East, the Baku Conference. The position of the Bolsheviks was that imperialism is the main enemy of humanity. So there. All righty. All right. Restrictions on Cuba. Right. So there's a lot of misinterpretation. So people say, well, the restrictions on trade with Cuba, that only affects American companies, but the rest of the world can trade with Cuba. Now, if you trade with Cuba, you cannot trade with American companies, right? Basically, the USA not only boycotts Cuba, but it boycotts anyone who does business with Cuba, right? So if you're a company and you do business with Cuba, you cannot do business with the United States. And yes, it does affect food. Yes, it does affect medicine. And I'm so tired of these gusanos lying about it. All right. Siege socialism. Well, look, socialism in the developing world is largely under siege, right? Embargoes and blockades and such. And it's amazing what they've accomplished in spite of all of that. The fact that, the Soviet Union was the first country in outer space, defeated the Nazis, industrialized the whole country, raised millions of people out of poverty, electrified the country. I mean, what they did, turning an agrarian backward country into an economic superpower, that was amazing. And they did it, under siege from the Western imperialists. The imperialists never gave the Soviet Union a moment of peace. 27 million, people killed during World War II, a barricade, a blockade, but they still accomplished that. Same for China, right? Same for Cuba, same for Venezuela, the same for Nicaragua. I mean, all that the countries have accomplished, despite being in a state of siege, is very amazing. And imagine that they weren't under siege. Imagine what North Korea would look like without the U.S. sanctions on them. Imagine what China, China at this point, the second largest economy in the world, 800 million lifted. Imagine what China would look like without all the, smears and attacks of the imperialists. All right. Factionalism among MLs. Factionalism among MLs. Alphabet soup. Imagine, right? So, all they've accomplished, all the miracles that socialism has achieved, despite everything. Imagine what it could be like without that, without the siege. All right. Parallels in the origins of Christianity and the origins of communism. Well, Christianity, ultimately, the form that it took and that it now takes originated in Rome. Christianity was a religion of Jews, first Jews in Rome, Jewish proletarians, and it expanded to Greek proletarians. But in Rome was the first place in the world you had the proletariat as a class, right? Rome was a slave society. But in Rome, you had a group of people who were neither slaves, no one owned them, but they were not masters either, right? They were people who sold their labor power. They were pipe fitters and bricklayers and blacksmiths and craftsmen, usually. They were proletarians. And many of them were Greek and many of them were Jews. And the proletariat, this was the first time we'd had such a class. And as a result of having the proletarian class, you had homelessness. Slaves were never homeless. They had somewhere to live. They were property of somebody else, right? But you had homeless children all throughout Rome. Homeless children all throughout the streets. People from afar, they would say, wow, Rome is the richest city. It's this world empire. But we get there and the streets are full of these children that are starving. How does this make any sense? Right? There were homeless children. There was unemployment. And the proletariat of ancient Rome, they would often get ripped off and, get exploited. So the proletariat of ancient Rome, they started having to fight for their rights. They started going on strike. And they started pushing back against the employers. And they started building orphanages for the hungry kids. And they started having food programs to take care of each other. Christianity was the religion of the proletariat. Jesus Christ was a carpenter. He was a proletarian, and he was neither a slave nor a landowner. He did not own anyone else, and he himself was not owned. And the Jews of Rome, and eventually the Greeks of Rome, and many proletarians throughout Rome, began to worship this Palestinian teacher and revolutionary called Jesus of Nazareth, who was a proletarian and who said that you must create, that the creation of wealth through labor was, I don't have my Bible in front of me, but I can read you many things that he said that were communistic, right? And that, one had an obligation to love thy neighbor as themselves, and one had an obligation to feed hungry children. And Jesus Christ and the Christian movement, Christianity in Rome, was the movement of the proletariat. That's what Christianity was. Christianity was the movement of the proletariat. There was no science back then, okay? There was there was very little political ideology. The proletarian movement, the first proletarian movement among the world's first proletarians, originated in the city of Rome as Christianity. Christianity was the movement, it was the religion, and the organizing tool of the proletariat. That's the most important thing. However, Christianity began to divide, okay? Because on the one hand, many of the Roman proletarians wanted the proletarians to rise up and overthrow the landowners and have a society where the last shall be first and the first shall be last, and everyone has what they need. It was a revolutionary movement of the proletariat. But there started to be some people in the Roman ruling class who said, hey, the Christians are building these orphanages so we don't have all the kids running around, and they're feeding people so we don't have bread riots. Maybe we can use some elements of Christianity. We can kind of water it down and use it to try and stabilize our empire. All right? And as Rome was in decline, gradually Christianity divided into two camps. There was one section that was very much the radical and revolutionary section that held on to the belief in a revolution of the proletariat against the empire. There was another section that was being utilized by the Romans to stabilize their empire. All right. GDP inaccurate. Okay? And that became a divide. And if you read the book of Revelations, the Revelation to John, the final book of the Bible, there is a rant against the whore of Babylon. Pages and pages about the whore of Babylon, the great whore. Well, it's pretty clear if you read it. This is the Christian church in Rome ranting against the sellouts, against the people that are collaborating with the Roman Empire, against the other Christians, right? And it's a rant against those those who are in the name of the Christian religion becoming tools of the empire, right? And that's in the book of Revelations. And there's clearly a divide in the early church, right? And eventually, with the conversion of Constantine, Rome, as it's falling apart, eventually adopts Christianity as its official religion. Well, that was a little bit of a divide. So does this parallel Marxism? Of course, right? Marxism is the modern scientific, not religious, scientific movement for the liberation of the proletariat. And as Marxism proliferated, a trend among Marxists developed who don't want to overthrow imperialism, don't want to overthrow capitalism, but want to use elements of socialism like free healthcare and free education to make their empire more stable. Social democracy is the whore of Babylon. Social democracy is the whore of Babylon. And just as the early Christian church divided between those who were fighting for the proletariat and maintaining Christ's teachings, and those who were using Christian imagery as a way to try and stabilize the Roman Empire, Marxism and social democracy have also developed. And that is the division, right? And if you read The Foundations of Christianity by Karl Kautsky, this is made overwhelmingly clear, right? And so there you go. Okay, next point. China meeting with the Taliban. Well, it is in China's interests for Afghanistan to be stable. The USA has been maintaining Afghanistan as a strategic epicenter of chaos, and it is in China's interest that Afghanistan become more stable, more economically prosperous, and so for China to sit down with the Taliban makes perfect sense. If Afghanistan were bordering the United States, I think our leaders would want to sit down with the Taliban. So there you go. All right. Housing in Russia, I don't know about that. And Putin is economically quite left-wing. That's true. I mean, Russia has a national health care service. They have very strong labor protections, very good maternity thing. I mean, there is much more, kind of a social democratic model. There's a lot of state control over the economy in Russia. Economically speaking, Putin is quite left-wing, no question about it. I don't know about the housing question. Is Singapore state capitalist? Yes, it is. The economy of Singapore is organized to make profits. There are several ruling families. There's kind of a clique of ruling families. But there's a heavy amount of state involvement in the economy of Singapore. There's a huge amount of government control and state regulation. But at the end of the day, it's still a profit-centered economy. Singapore is a capitalist country, but it's like Saudi Arabia. It's state capitalism, where the state is heavily involved, but the economy is still organized to make profits. The story behind my badass ring. Well, so when I went to Iran, I noticed that all the men in Iran wear rings like this. And so I was asked what it is. It's called an akek ring. I was just like, okay. But then I Googled the tradition of wearing an akek ring, and I found out why Muslim men wear akek rings. And I heard the story, and I had to get one. So basically, the story goes like this. The Prophet Muhammad, he started a new religion, right, that worships one true God, it's rejecting polytheism. So when the Prophet Muhammad's followers seized the temple at Mecca, the temple of Mecca was full of pagan idols, right? These pagan idols that people were worshiping. And the Prophet Muhammad's followers smashed all those idols and converted the temple at Mecca to a temple to the one true God, not, this place where people could go burn sacrifices to a bunch of idols. And so, to celebrate the victory over paganism, the Prophet Muhammad wore an akek ring with a little piece of one of the statues that he and his followers had destroyed when they seized the temple at Mecca. I thought that was it was like a celebration of the victory of the seizure of the temple, and that's why he wore it. And that reminded me of a very important point made by the writer Thomas Carlyle. And he talked about how we need to reinterpret this idol smashing. Right? So we hear about this. Every ancient prophet seemed to go around smashing idols, right? This was a thing that every ancient prophet did. Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Moses, they're all smashing idols. Moses, he smashes the golden calf. Ezekiel, Jeremiah, they're all, Isaiah, right? He says they shall cast away their idols of silver and their idols of gold and bow before the one true God. What's going on here, right? Ancient people were not stupid. They did not literally believe that this statue, they built a statue of a cow, a statue of a sheep. They did not literally believe that this ancient statue, this ancient fetish, this ancient idol was a god. Thomas Carlyle argues, he says, no. What's going on was that when these statues, when these idols were erected, they were symbols of higher ideas. And gradually, those ideals were forgotten, and people got into the dull routine of bowing before the statue and worshiping the statue. And when the prophet comes to smash the idols in order to restore the principles upon which those idols were originally built. The prophet comes to restore truth and passion to the earth and to sweep away the dull routines. And I thought that's pretty damn badass. That's pretty badass, right? That the prophet is one who restores passion to the earth and restores the truths and the meaning of these religions and gets rid of the dull routines. So the fact that the Prophet Muhammad wore this ring to celebrate the smashing of idols, combined with what I read in Thomas Carlyle's writing about the smashing of idols, combined with the fact that the Chinese Revolution started in China with Dr. Sun Yat-sen smashing a bunch of idols. Did you know that? The first revolutionary act of Dr. Sun Yat-sen was in China. The peasantry, the way they would be humiliated and degraded by the landlords is they would have to bow before these statues. So this is in like 1910, 1900. Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who wants to build a strong China, wants his people to stop being humiliated by the landlords and humiliated by feudalism and dominated by the Western capitalists. Dr. Sun Yat-sen goes to this temple and he smashes a bunch of idols. And he says to the Chinese people, we need science, we need modernity, we do not... So the fact that the Chinese Revolution begins with the smashing of idols. When I found out that the reason the Shia Muslim men that I met in Iran were wearing these rings was related to CPI study groups in New York City, Richard, just email me. CalebMaupin@gmail.com. I can connect you. Just email me, right? Just send me an email, Richard. All one word, CalebMaupin@gmail.com. The fact that that this was about celebrating the smashing of idols and the victory over the idols at the Temple of Mecca, I thought I need to wear one of these. And so now I ordered one and I wear it. So there you go. All righty. That is the story behind my badass ring. All righty. Embargo sanctions. Well, an embargo refers to restrictions on trade. Sanctions can be any kind of punishment. So there you go. Sanction, if you punish someone, you're sanctioning them. But an embargo is a restriction on trade. They're two terms that refer to generally the same thing, but a sanction can be any punishment. An embargo refers to a restriction on trade. When China completely overpowers the USA in several years, will we see the end of siege socialism? I wouldn't count on that necessarily happening, Tunia. I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen in a few years because I don't. Thank you for the beautiful story. You're welcome, Fluffing Fluff. All right, communist leader in Russia banned. I've seen some news items about that, but I don't know the whole story, so I'm going to look into that. I'd like to look into that and talk more about it, but I don't want to say anything that's wrong, right? I have a responsibility on here. I have a responsibility on here to give you accurate information. And so I've seen a couple news items, but I want to get the whole story. All right, there are 3 space communists. Are you referring to Chinese astronauts? Is that what you're referring to? China's space program is amazing. We need to not be against the space program, right? We need to, the government having its priorities, sure. Jeff Bezos and his private space thing is disgusting, yes. But the space program, going to outer space, acquiring helium-3 from the moon, scientific progress is a good thing. And don't fall into the trap of arguing that scientific progress and, feeding people, no, they go together. And we need to not fall for that trap, right? That, socialism is not pessimistic. Socialism invented space travel, for goodness sakes. All righty. Are the imperialists in retreat in Latin America? No, they've attacked Cuba recently with the destabilization and the color revolution, so that's not retreat. I would say the imperialists are losing in Latin America, but they're still being aggressive. They're still, attacking Venezuela. They still, right now, they don't have mass support, and Europe is not giving them the backing it once gave them. I think that's a big factor. You'll notice when the USA is not able to be dominant in Latin America, it's because of the role of Europe, usually. If Europe is with the United States, the USA is much more effective. But when Europe is not totally with the United States, then you can start seeing anti-imperialists win great victories. All right. Someone says that the horns were signs of ancient divinity. That's possible too. I'm giving you my interpretation. All right. Which socialist principles are non-negotiable? Well, look. We need to be clear about what the definition of socialism and the definition of capitalism is. I think the way you're putting it is like there's these vague principles that are socialist and all of that. No. Socialism is an economy that is organized not for profit, but for public good. It's when profits are no longer in command. Socialism is not free healthcare. It can have free healthcare. It should have free healthcare, but that's not the essence of socialism. Socialism is not everyone's equal and everyone gets paid the exact same way. Socialism is not progressive taxation. Socialism is the dismantling of profits in command and the organizing of the economy on the basis of public good and rational central planning. And socialism is by definition anti-imperialist because imperialism is not a verb. It doesn't mean one country attacks another country. That's imperialism. Imperialism is a global economic system. It is the rule of monopoly capitalism. It is capitalism in its monopoly stage, and socialism seeks to dismantle capitalism. So if you're a socialist, to be truly socialist, you're dismantling capitalism, you're moving toward a planned economy, you are by definition anti-imperialist. So socialism is always socialism, and socialism is always anti-imperialist. And other things are good, but they're not the essence of the problem. All right. Did communists suppress religion? Yes, and that was awful, and it was wrong, right? And nowadays, things are different. In Latin America, almost all the communists are Christians, right? The Sandinistas have Christianity in their constitution. It is in the official Nicaraguan constitution. In the preamble, it says that they are a Christian government. The slogan, in Nicaragua, the communist government there is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. Maduro is Roman Catholic. Evo Morales was Roman Catholic, and that Fidel Castro in the 90s he started he converted to Christianity. He got confession with the Pope. So, I mean, that things are changing. In the Arab world, the Ba'ath Arab Socialist Movement embraced Islam. Gaddafi embraced Islam. And that, yes, horrendous mistakes were made in the 20th century. The way Christians were treated in the Soviet Union was wrong. It was wrong. It wasn't the same throughout the entire existence of the Soviet Union, but it was still wrong. The way Christians and Muslims were treated in Albania was wrong, right? And that ultimately, the fight between communists and religious groups was rooted in the struggle against feudalism. Under feudalism, religion is very different than it is under capitalism or in socialism. In feudalism, the church and the state are synonymous, and it is used to maintain the feudal hierarchy. Communists in China, communists in Russia were ripping apart the feudal system, so naturally they saw the church as their enemy. But times have changed. The world has changed. Why did Marxist socialism subside? Marxist socialism did not subside. Soviet-style socialism subsided. There is not a socialist movement in the world today that is not oozing with Marxian influence, right? First of all, the Chinese Communist Party is a Marxist party. The DPRK, the Korean Workers' Party, that's a Marxist party. Right? The Cuban Communist Party, that's a Marxist party. Okay? The Bolivarian leaders, they are not MLs, they're not Marxist-Leninists. They quote Marx constantly. They quote Lenin constantly. They quote, the Sandinistas. I mean, officially they're a Christian government. They quote Marx constantly. In the Ba'ath movement, in Ba'athist Syria and Ba'athist Iraq, Marxism was taught in the Ba'ath schools, right? Even in Iran, Marxism is rejected because it is considered to be anti-Islamic, but yet there's a huge Marxist influence in the Iranian anti-imperialist movement. I've been there and I've seen it. I mean, a lot of the hardliners in Iran, they talk about imperialism. They draw heavily from Lenin's analysis of imperialism, and so you're just, Soviet-style socialism had big problems, and as a movement, the Soviet-aligned current, the Soviet ML current, was weakened by the fall of the Soviet Union, and it had problems, and it needed to change. And the old Soviet-style ML parties around the world are still very weak. And I was in one of those parties for a long time, and I mean, that's not where the future is, right? The future is with socialism, the future is with anti-imperialism, the future is with anti-capitalism and socialism and communism, but it's, the old ML parties, they're pretty weak. They need to change, right? We've reached a new stage. History is moving forward. All right. Mexico in 1938, the nationalization of oil. In 1938, Mexico had a progressive Bonapartist government that supported the Spanish Republic. It was not a socialist government, but it was kind of a populist, anti-imperialist government. And Trotsky lived there and all of that. And the nationalization of the oil, was part of the kind of populist Bonapartist moves that government carried out. The Mexican Revolution was a very progressive revolution. It was, the landless people rising up. It was a great victory. We forget how amazing it was, how amazing what Zapata did. Emilio Zapata was a great revolutionary, and the Mexican Revolution often gets overlooked. Right, south of the United States, there was an amazing progressive revolution that you can read about. So there you go. All right, Gaddafi's ambassador in 2011. Who cares? What's been the result of the U.S. intervention in Libya? Was it good? Was it good for the USA to go and destabilize Libya? Are the people of Libya any better off? No. Right? Was it a good idea for the USA to arm and train the terrorists the guy who blew up the Manchester concert was one of the people the USA armed to overthrow Gaddafi. Okay, so I don't care if you can dig up what some ambassador said back in 2011. Look at the results. And thank you, class analysis. The John Brown volunteers are doing amazing work. They are doing amazing work, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for that super chat. There you go. Factionalism among MLs. Well, look, I'm not a member of any party. I know people in the Communist Party. I know people in the PSL, Party of Socialism and Liberation. I know people in the Party of Communists. I know people that are in various different communist groups, Rayo Light, and Rayo Light, and United States Marxist-Leninist Organization, and I say this with deep respect to all the people that are in these various groups, none of these groups are real parties. None of these groups are really a mass political organization leading the working class to take power. And if I were to form one of these groups and start playing the my party's better than yours, I would lose influence. I am not a politician. I'm not running for office. I'm not trying to build a political party. I'm trying to educate. I am trying to build a think tank that can push scientific anti-imperialist Marxism and orient the socialist movement away from the synthetic left. And that's what I'm trying to do. People that are members of any party are welcome to work with me on that. And I'm trying to do something different because something different needs to be done. If all that was needed to overthrow capitalism, if it was just necessary to form one of these parties, have one of these parties lead the working class to victory, that would have happened by now. And all these groups are getting weaker, okay? So we need something different. Alrighty, is GDP an accurate way of measuring economic growth? No, I mean, it is in a way. I mean, you're measuring the gross domestic product, but at the end of the day, I mean, you're not measuring the standard of living, how it's going up. I mean, there are other indexes. There are a variety of different economic measurement indexes that have been developed. GDP is one measurement, but it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient. There are other mechanisms for measuring economic growth that have been developed. That there are many competing models. GDP is the one that's used pretty universally, but all that really shows is how much economic growth is taking place. But that economic growth is not distributed fairly. That doesn't mean people's living standards are going up. That doesn't mean that conditions are getting better in communities. There are all kinds of factors. If you really want to calculate how people are doing, right? You need to calculate their wages, but then you have to talk about inflation and how much their money is really worth, the crime rate in their area, the costs of public transportation, the costs of going to work. I mean, there's many, many different factors that can be calculated. So on that note, folks, I think we're going to end it here. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Fusion City now. Good night.